Hey guys, hope you are all doing well today. So we have a matchup between the Tomb Kings going up against the forces of the Lizardmen. The Tomb Kings are going to be led by Wei. He was the one who sent this replay to me, and I don't exactly remember who was commanding the Lizardmen, but we will check them out in the end screen. For the Tomb King army, we have a front line of standard skeleton spearmen who should be able to hold out for a decent amount of time against a lot of the Lizardmen infantry. We have two units of Ushapti with great bows who should target down those dinos relatively quickly. They are a elite anti-large unit. Well, their missiles aren't anti-large, but their missile strength is high enough that they can pretty much target all those dinos down with ease. We have a Sphinx of Usef, the Regiment of Renowned Necrosphinx, not a unit you get to see terribly often in this matchup, but with his anti-large attacks as well, he should be able to one-on-one duel majority of the dinos down. For the back lines, we have two units of Tomb Guards with Halberds for some additional infantry-sized anti-large, and some Capra Guard for anti-infantry. We also have the Regiment of Renowned Sepulchral Stalkers, the Eyes of the Desert. Their range attacks are also anti-large, so you can see this army is heavily based around an anti-large kind of strategy. And against the Lizardmen, that is a viable strategy due to the fact that they can field a ton of dinos for a relatively low cost. So that pretty much makes up the... Oh, we also have to go over the Lord and Hero Core, of course. We have the Leash Priest with Lore of Nehekara, a lore you don't get to see terribly often, but it can be pretty powerful. We have Jaf's Incantation of Cursed Blades, and we have Usef's Incantation of Desiccation. We also have the generic Tomb King with the Curse, My Will Be Done, and Tomb Strike. So pretty powerful Tomb King army, and let's check out how it does against this not typical Lizardmen army. Yeah, definitely not a Lizardmen army you get to see terribly often, but it seems pretty interesting, so let's check them out. So we have the Skink Chief in the skies with a decent bit of missile strength. His missile attacks can definitely add up over the course of the battle. We do have two Pterodon Riders, one of which are the Pahak Sentinels, who come with an Armor Sundering Rock Drop, which probably isn't the greatest in this matchup since most of the Tomb King units don't have the most armor, but still, they are pretty powerful air units. We also have the Great Ancient Salamander. Now, this is one of the matchups I actually like to bring the Ancient Salamander in, mostly because he has a decent amount of speed, and so if you can send him in front of your Lizardmen army, you can try and waste some of the Great Bow ammunition on him as he tries to run in circles to try and dodge those bullets. His speed is high enough that he can pretty much dodge all the great bow shots with ease, but you do have to watch out once you are in combat that you don't let him stay in one place for too long, since those great bows will absolutely melt him in a couple of seconds. Once that the recent debuff that he got has completely nerfed his HP and makes him very, very squishy. For the main Lizardmen line, we have a very tightly packed box with an interesting little synergy, which I'll explain in a second. So we have the Star Chamber Guardians leading the way, the Regiment of Renowned Temple Guard, 3 units of Sar Spears, one of which are the Legion of Chaqua, and some Red Crested Skinks in the back. We have the Great Lord Mazdamundi coming in with only Banishment, or so no spells, surprisingly enough. Shield of the Old Ones and Banishment. I'm pretty surprised there are no spells. Lord Mazdamundi has amazing Winds of Magic, and that's one of the best reasons you should bring him. He does have some great spells as well. Curse the Midnight Wind. I'm blanking out on the others. He has Nats as well. Faz? No, he doesn't have Faz protection. He has something else. Yeah, but he has a very, very good kit of spells, which I'm pretty surprised not to see here. And we do have Lord Croak as well with his Deliverances of Itza. So the synergy I was talking about was giving this entire infantry blob a ton of missile resistance. So the Legion of Chaqua has an ability which gives 44% missile resistance for 25 seconds to any unit around it once it is activated. And that is why you see this tightly grouped formation. That 44% missile resistance will make them really, really resistant to Great Bow Fire. We also do have Lord Mazdamundi coming in with the Sunburst Standard, which gives an additional 12% miss resistance to all units around it, so that is a good 56% miss resistance. In addition to that, actually, the Star Chambered Guardians, and this only applies to Kroak and Mazdamundi, the Star Chambered Guardians do have a Guardian ability, which gives 15% physical resistance to Kroak and Lord Mazdamundi. And so they will have a very high amount of miss resistance coming into this battle. Not to mention they come with their own miss resistance, I believe. I believe each Lord comes in with 15% base miss resistance, and I believe Kroak has that as well. So currently their missile strength, even without the Legion of Chakwa activating their ability, is going to be 52%. So the Tomb Kings would be making a pretty big mistake by trying to shoot down Mazdamundi or Kroak. Anyways, let's get started with this battle, as the Lizardmen will be pushing forward, and some initial fire will be going into a lot of the Pterodon Riders, but they should be able to dodge it relatively easily. Of course, a big danger for the Lizardmen is having the Ancient Salamander sniped out, so it is a pretty good decision to leave him back for a little bit. But now, looks like they will be pushing in as the Lizardmen front does move to engage. Let's speed it up since it seems like the approach will be taking a little bit of time. You can see the Great Bow Fire initially is going into Lord Mazdamundi, which he is practically, with the Shield of Chakwa activated, he is practically invulnerable to that kind of, to those, yeah, so only 44% miss resistance. Oh, looks like the Legion of Chakwa, their ability weared off, but he had an enormous amount of miss resistance, which you definitely do not want to mess with. And now the Lizardmen front lines will be engaging, as we do have a pretty big engagement in the back lines as Pterodon Riders get a good couple rock drops on the Eyes of the Desert. Rock drops are really only good against against tightly grouped infantry formations, so constructs like the Sepulchral Stalkers will not be taking the most damage from them, but the Skink Chief, with its consistent damage and 400 missile strength bout, is doing a decent bit of damage to the Eyes of the Desert, not to mention the Pterodon Riders do come with their own missile attacks, and so that is really adding up. The Ancient Salamander is also giving its own missile attacks, but now the Eyes of the Desert have turned around and are returning fire. For the frontline engagement, we have the first Deliverance of Itza, I believe, coming down, and the Tomb Kings will dodge it relatively easily. I believe this is the smallest Deliverance of Itza, and so it doesn't really do the most damage. And now the Ancient Salamander getting some pretty big friendly damage into the Star Chambered Guardians. Luckily they can tank it out like a beast, but what he wants to do is maybe just try and flank around and hit them from the sides where they are most heavily grouped up, such as like right over here. The Tomb Kings, on the other hand, doing a good job of protecting their backlines and making sure a lot of the Lizardmen mobility, such as those Pterodon Riders, don't hop on top of the Great Bows and stop them from firing. Even with all that miss resistance that the Lizardmen have in this blob, consistent Ushabti Great Bow Fire should be able to do a decent bit of damage. And now the Ancient Salamander is in melee with the Leash Priest. It should be able to beat down the Leash Priest pretty easily, but unfortunately the Great Bows will be taking some pot shots into him and trying to knock him out of the fight relatively quickly. He hasn't really used much of his ammunition, so the Lizardman player really wants to get some good firing angles set up. The Sphinx of Usef has pushed in and is now attempting to knock out either of the Slanns, which is a very good idea since there's really nothing else on the Tomb King roster left anyway that can do damage to them. The Ushabti with their Great Bows, due to the missile resistance, won't be doing the most damage, and so you really need that Sphinx of Usef carrying the battle. We do have some of the Eyes of the Desert left, taking some very good shots into the Pahawk Sentinels and knocking them out of the fight. So they should be able to return and set up a firing line and do a decent bit of damage against both of the Slanns. A banishment going through the lines of Tomb Guard and consistent deliverances of Itzas, which I haven't been catching, have been massacring the lines of Tomb Kings, but they do have their most important anti-infantry units still alive and healthy in the form of the Kepler Guard, and looks like they're attempting to flank around and hit from behind. We also have a Ushabti summon coming in from behind, and that should give a decent leadership hit as the Lizardmen units will be completely surrounded. Another deliverance of its Croak has been completely massacring the Tomb King infantry. Let's check out his kill, 177. Yeah, of course, this is the scary thing of going up against Lord Croak, is if you blob around his box, you will get completely massacred. Currently the fight is looking slightly Tomb King favored, as you can tell from the balance of power. But the Lizardman box is doing quite a bit of damage to a lot of the constructs, including, well, Tomb King, I'm not sure if he's considered a construct, probably not. Yeah, he's not a construct, but the Tomb King is taking quite a bit of damage himself, and the Sphinx of Usef, who is a construct, has lost about half HP, but Lord Croak is getting very, very low on HP. The Shield of Chaqua is activated, giving a little bit of missile resistance, pretty much nulling the damage that these great bows will be doing for the most part. But once it wears off, they should be back to firing. And oh man, the Sphinx of Usef has just been doing so much damage to Lord Croak. Of course, the Sphinx of Usef does want to watch out for the Star Chamber Guardian, since their anti-large is very powerful. But as long as he is doing consistent damage to those Slans, he should be just fine and pretty much paying for himself relatively quickly. And the Tomb King does fall. Lord Mazdamundi is very low on HP himself, so it won't be the greatest of losses for the Tomb King. Additionally, they are unbreakable, so of course the Tomb King will be getting the more favorable trade if they manage to knock out Lord Mazdamundi, and the Sphinx, as I explained before, will be carrying this battle. Though he is at critical binding, and if he stays in this anti-large blob for too long, he might be falling relatively soon, but his job is accomplished as he knocks out the great venerable Lord Mazdamundi, and it seems like the Leash Priest might be able to chase him off. Lord Mazdamundi is a very, very slow lord. Let's check out the speeds. 31, 34, actually Lord Mazdamundi would be able to escape him. But with Lord Mazdamundi gone, the Lizardmen units are rapidly collapsing, and the Ushabti Great Bows, who are of course pretty decent in melee themselves, should be able to destroy a lot of the remaining troops. Of course, having these Kepler Guard alive as well, these healthy Kepler Guard should be able to solo the rest of the Lizardmen infantry. But it never hurts to have two Ushabti units on top of that as well. If Lord Mazdamundi does return, he will have to face the might of the Leash Priest, which really isn't that mighty. But Slans, of course, are very, very squishy, so I do believe the Leash Priest might be able to rout him off. And the Sphinx of Usef is crumbling, but he was not knocked out in time for the Lizardmen infantry to win the day, and so the Tomb Kings will be taking this matchup. So let's check out how each of the units did. So looks like the Lizardmen were commanded by Alos Sauron, and this was a very, very interesting synergy. I did not expect Lord Croak to do this good in this matchup, but surprisingly he is sitting at 256 kills, which is definitely a very, very high number. The synergy with the Legion of Chaqua, along with the Sunburst Standard of Lord Mazdamundi and the Guardian ability of the Star Chamber Guardians, is not one I've seen before, but it is very, very interesting, and maybe I'll try it out in a future matchup. The rest of the Lizardmen army performed relatively average. The infantry doesn't have the greatest attacking stats. Temple Guard and Star Spears are mainly meant to hold out until the end of the battle, and so there, in my opinion, there wasn't too much in the way of a hard-hitting unit, and unfortunately, the Ancient Salamander was knocked out of the fight relatively quickly. As I said, if you don't micro him well enough, those Ushabti with Great Bows will absolutely melt him in a couple seconds, and I'm guessing that's what happened because I didn't get to catch that in this battle. And on the Tomb King side of things, I think they made a little bit of a mistake going for the Lizardmen box and trying to blob around, allowing those deliverances of Itzas to really deal a ton of damage, making this battle a little bit closer than they would have wanted. but in the end they were able to pull out with the massive amounts of anti-large that they had. Inevitably, the Slanns would fall to the Necrosphinx along with the Tomb King, but they definitely dealt a bit of damage before leaving the battlefield. This is a Tomb King favored matchup, and so it's not very surprising to see them win, but the way that they won was definitely pretty admirable, as the Sphinx of Usef pretty much soloed 2 Slanns by himself. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this battle. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you guys in the next one.